And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting down to SE off. Bring in SE off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Good evening / early morning. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where Falcon 9 is set to return to flight after a brief downtime following the most recent Starlink mission and the failed booster landing. But we've got 21 Starlink satellites that are ready to launch back again tonight. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for this evening's broadcast, and the oh no voice underneath Jax from last stream. But I am not alone, as always. I am joined tonight by the fantastic Trevor Sesnick. Trevor, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It's kind of insane that it was just about 48 hours ago that we were all like, "Uh-oh, what will this mean for the future of Falcon launches? How long will they go without a launch?" And the answer was about 48 hours, so very excited to be here.
Oh, yeah. And also very excited to have the innumerable Max Evans. How's it going, Max?
That's a new one. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. It's weird to say that Falcon 9 has had some downtime when in reality it has not felt like downtime at all. And I guess that's just a testament to the SpaceX teams involved for the cadence that has still been knocked off over the year despite Falcon's very, very rare woes.
Yeah, this feels just like a normal turnaround time for Pad 40, in a way.
It certainly does. Absolutely.
And pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, running in the human hamster wheel is the phantasmagorical Carson. In case you can't tell, coming up with fun names tonight to keep things awake in this early hour, but one thing that's definitely been keeping us awake is the fact that we have a launch again a lot sooner than most of us expected. So, Trevor, can you kind of give us a rundown of what launch we've got going on tonight?
Yeah, of course. So this is actually one of two Starlink missions tonight. Originally, there was supposed to be a Starlink mission from Vandy about an hour ago, but this is the one from Florida, which is Starlink Group 8-10. So as usual on these missions from Florida, where they have DTC satellites direct to cell, they will be launching 21 Starlink satellites, with 13 of those having the direct to cell capability. And those will be going into that usual roughly 53-degree inclined orbit at the a little under 200 kilometer or a little over 200 kilometer circular orbit. Lifting off today will be B1069-18 from Space Launch Complex 40. Following launch, the booster will attempt landing on Just Read the Instructions, which is about 600 kilometers downrange, was tugged down by Signet Warhorse III, and then Go Cosmos will be recovering both fairing halves and also providing ASDS support. The notable stats on this mission is, of course, this will hopefully be the first consecutive booster landing, not the stat we want to be bringing up, given it's one, but let's all cross our fingers for B1069 making a successful landing. And then this will also be the 100th recovery attempt on, or sorry, that was the other launch. That will be the 100th recovery attempt on, Of Course I Still Love You. I'm getting my launches confused. So yeah, 369th overall, and then 86th SpaceX launch of 2024.
There you go. And the other unfortunate number there was 14 since the last failure. That was the second stage issue back in July. And it just so happens that the booster that was the return to flight for that mission was B1069 as well. I mean, Max, you had the perfect analogy for it earlier.
I did, but I also want to point out first that ironically, B1069 started out in life with a very rough landing on a drone ship. I believe it was CRS 24 in 2021. Its very first flight, and it came down really, really hard and crushed a lot of the engine bells and crushed a lot of the crush cores, of course, that support the landing legs as well. So this booster knows all too well what it's like to have a rough landing. But the analogy that Sawyer was talking about was this booster has made both RTF flights this year after Falcon has had its problems. And I essentially made the point that booster 1069 now is essentially equivalent to the orbiter Discovery. Now Crispy is happy because shuttle. But it has made both RTF flights and has a decent amount of flight time compared to the rest of the Falcon 9 fleet. So maybe this is the next contender for the very best booster in the fleet. I guess time will tell whether or not that will hold up.
We will have to see, and you have awoken the Chris Bergen in chat already.
Excellent.
Oh, so we keep talking about the return to flight portion of it. Trevor, can you kind of go over what happened during that landing and how we got back here so quickly?
Yeah, so right, it was the launch on uh August 28th, not October. What is my brain doing? Starlink Group 8-6 with B1062-23. So that this is the most amount of times a booster has flown on this mission. B1062 is flying for its 23rd time, and everything seemed nominal through ascent, through the entry burn, and then even through the beginning of the landing burn. It all seemed quite good until it seemed like the booster was just coming in a little bit quick, and the booster ended up smashing into the deck of a shortfall of gravitas at, I believe it was about 10 kilometers an hour or so. And that was well beyond the amount of velocity and forces that the landing legs are meant to hold, right? This is about it's about 3 times faster than a nominal landing, so right, roughly 9 to 10 times more energy that those legs would have to absorb. And with that, the landing legs failed, and then the entire booster tipped over. We did not get from SpaceX an exact failure mode. They haven't, unfortunately, come out and said what happened yet, although I suspect Elon will probably update us at some point once that investigation has wrapped up. However, following that landing failure, as per the new FAA guidelines that came out in March of 2021, SpaceX had to, this counted against SpaceX on their launch license, so they had to, as we've gotten used to with these failures at this point, whether it's Starship or Falcon, they had to either convince the FAA that there was no risk to the public, so therefore they should be allowed to continue flying, or conclude that investigation, submit corrective action, corrective items to the FAA, and then implement all of those. Once again, here SpaceX got the approval from the FAA that, yeah, we agree there is no risk to the public, so even though you had a mishap on your last flight, you're all cleared to fly. So then that's how we're back here already. SpaceX obviously must not be too concerned about whatever data they've found, given that they're going for not just 1 but 2 launches today, and they haven't, especially the one on Vandenberg, they wouldn't have had time to do any hardware changes. So yeah, they're on screen right now. You can kind of see some of the, like, there's a landing leg from B1062 on a shortfall of gravitas that was returned to the port earlier today. But hopefully there's a fairly long update as to what happened, but let's just all cross our fingers that we get to, 1,000 landings in a row now without an incident.
Agreed. And again, we have an entire video on the YouTube channel here going over the speculation of what it could be, analyzing the video footage, everything you need to know about that landing that we know so far. And Max, you were actually flying today, taking a look at some of the damage. What were your thoughts seeing it?
Yeah, there is a lot less. There was a lot less debris on deck compared to 1058 when that unfortunately tipped over last December. And of course, obviously, much different circumstances. 1058 had a good landing and toppled over because of rough seas and was attached to the octograbber, whereas 1062 just came in hot and had a bad landing and of course toppled over. And there was still some prop in the tanks, and the COPVs were still pressurized. And of course, when that's all blown sideways with a very hard impact on deck, that can create some spectacular, rapid, unscheduled disassemblies. So there was just the octograbber in a section, like probably a quarter of the RP1 tank still left attached to the octaweb, I should say, excuse me, with the engines, with all 9 Merlins still there, with I think 1 or 2 having their bells pretty squished. And then there were assortments or remnants of what were landing legs, both attached to the octaweb and tank structure, and also scattered about all over the deck. I mean, there was debris all over, big and small. Obviously, the most noteworthy being the octaweb and the legs and the tank structure. But it's also interesting to note that the top of the tank structure, where you would normally be able to look down in and see either the fuel collector or any of the plumbing that leads into the engine section of Falcon, that has all been covered up by a tarp, I suspect, because SpaceX does not want any prying eyes looking in and seeing proprietary technology or gathering information that may not otherwise be known to the public for very good reasons. Cough, cough, ITAR. But yes, we were out there, and it was, it never feels good to see the remnants of what was a very reliable and very noteworthy piece of orbital class hardware. Yeah, it's never fun to see, but mistakes happen, and no one is immune to it. So, knowing SpaceX, they will have that deck cleaned off, and not too long from now, if not a majority already of that debris gone off of deck right now. And that drone ship will hopefully be heading back out to sea for Polaris Dawn in the not too distant future.
And we'll
Yeah, I
touch on
think
Polaris Dawn. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there are 2 good pieces of news that can come out of this. Like, obviously, it sucks losing B1062, and it sucks that SpaceX had to stand down from the second Starlink launch the other night while they did this brief investigation. But first of all, the drone ship seems to be in good condition. So, like Max was saying, I bet they just sweep it off and it'll be on its way for Polaris, which is very good news. And second of all, right, these descent failures are kind of the best case scenario for SpaceX in some sense, because this way they're pushing the limits of Falcon, but not losing a mission. And right with Falcon, especially on these Starlink missions, they're wanting to take a little bit more risk. They're willing to take that risk so that they can push the boundaries a little bit more and learn more. So, obviously not the result we want, but not the worst one either.
Right, Max was talking about prying eyes. Let's take a look on the left side of your screen live from our fleet cam over on Space Coast Live, with our prying eyes taking a look right at the backside of Falcon 9. You could see the Merlin engine still there. Crews have been working on that all day since we've gotten back into port, seen people with cranes, with lifts, and most of them wearing hazmat suits, which, interestingly, Max, in your pictures, not a lot of them were.
Yeah, they were not. And maybe they found something that was worthy of being extra precautious and being safe around. I'm not entirely sure, and I don't think SpaceX is going to tell us either way.
Yeah, probably not. Well, as we take a look at the pad there right now, how about we check in on the weather? And the latest forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron, they still put it out just in case they were go for today, is 85% go. That 15% is the probability of violating weather constraints. Only issue cumulus cloud rule. All of the sea conditions look good. Solar activity looks good. Upper level winds thankfully look good. If for some reason they do have to delay 24 hours, it would attempt on September 1st, the window opening at 1:13 a.m. That would be 70% chance of go. But again, right now, as you can see, they're targeting 3:43 a.m. Eastern time. And I correct myself, 1:16, not 1:13. Speaking of the weather, Max, how does it look where you are?
I know their main concern was a building layer of cumulus clouds in the area, and there are some in the area, and most notably over my head, ironically, coming this way. But the way the rest of the sky is looking right now, that should clear up in time for launch. I'm not too concerned about it now, and we are still 45 minutes away or so. So I'm not too worried about the clouds covering out everything right now. Otherwise, there is a slight breeze coming out of the southeast that actually feels quite lovely because it is very humid and sticky, and it was pretty warm today as well. So any bit of a breeze, especially at this hour, to help keep the bugs off and help keep some airflow through your hair, would feel nice. Even though I don't have any.
I was going to say, what
Um,
hair?
yeah, no, I don't have any. But otherwise, it is looking great. Obviously, there's no moon out tonight, so the sky is a gorgeous inky black with a ton of stars poking out and saying hello. And hopefully, this big old cloud over our heads can clear out, and we will have a nice view all the way to SECO.
Be careful saying inky. I'm waiting for Jack to jump out now with
Oh
conky
no!
and all of those. Now he's got inky.
Even though inky is a real and it's an actual word, it's not just a word that Jack spooled up out of nowhere.
Yeah, those are the 4 ghosts in Pac-Man, right? Inky, Pinky, Blinky, and Conky.
That I don't even know. I think you. I will take your word on that one.
Conky is his Jack's way of calling Concord as a joke. But yeah, the real one, I believe, is Dot is the 4th.
Oh, that's so bad.
Or Clyde, excuse me. Clyde.
Good lord.
Boy, that hurt my brain. All right. Anyway. I do want to thank some support here real quick. Astro Knucklehead, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. And Michael getting an item from shop.nasaspaceflight.com saying, I really love all your streams. I'm addicted. I look forward to the day when I miss a Starship because it's ho-hum. I don't think that day will ever happen to anyone if it becomes ho-hum. And what do you know? Getting something from our brand new Thrust collection. Getting the Raptor shirt. In case you didn't know, we have brand new merch that was just released today so that now you can rep your favorite engine. Whether that be Raptor, Merlin, BE4, RS25, with more to come. We've got you covered. And each of them have a really cool slogan with them. Ironically, Merlin's being thrust you can trust. That was, yeah, this just happened to be the week that released.
We don't know it's the Merlin. It could be the Merlin could have been perfectly fine.
That is true. For right now, it's thrust you can probably trust. And once it is trusted, wear that shirt proud. I did see someone asking how it's doing in the polls. Adrian is asleep, but I'm assuming that Raptor is still leading the polls right now in terms of favored engine. Here's a question. Max, you kind of brought this up, but Trevor, I'm going to pose it to you. What does the Falcon 9 return to flight mean for Polaris Dawn? And they also added, what about the number of drone ships?
Yeah, so covering the Polaris Dawn point first, I would say there's probably no indication that this has caused any delay to Polaris Dawn. I'm sure that if they would have found something that they were concerned about, then obviously, yes, they would definitely want to better understand the issue before having a launch with humans on top. However, um, the launch was already delayed because of weather, and based on posts that Jared has made on X, it sounds like at this point they're just kind of waiting out to hear or to see what the weather will do, since right, this is a unique mission profile since they're not docking to anything. They have to be go for splashdown weather before they even launch. So that's a pretty unique constraint that makes them really have to be careful about when they launch, and that the splashdown weather and launch corridor weather is all good. So that's still the main I don't want to call it a delay, but the main holdup is just weather, and SpaceX unfortunately has not given us any updates as to how that's going. I imagine as soon as they find a window, Jared Isaacman did mention that they can be ready to launch within 30 hours. So that's a pretty quick turnaround time. And then he was also just mentioning in this post that SpaceX, as usual, is super upfront with them about all of these issues that are ongoing in the fleet. And as soon as they have an issue, they brief the crew about it, brief the crew. Here are the solutions that we're hoping to go forward with. Here's what we think the problem was. Here's how it's going to impact your mission. And so far, it sounds like none of that. As to the second part of the question about what does this mean for drone ships, like we were mentioning earlier, it seems like the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, is in good condition, right? They're kind of they obviously don't want to take many of these hard hits, but they're also, especially a shortfall of gravitas, they're designed to take some of these hard hits. But I definitely do see in the future SpaceX getting a fourth drone ship, especially as the 6 comes online. So nothing in the work yet. Some SpaceX VPs on X have hinted about it, but nothing concrete yet.
Right, and we expect that they will require a drone ship downrange, so that will also play a part of it. In addition to, as you and Jared and all of them have mentioned, that splashdown weather, which is super important. So we will keep you updated as much as we know as well on the latest timeline. Speaking of latest timeline, let's take a look at where we are in the countdown right now. We have official word from SpaceX that Falcon 9 is ready, weather's looking good, and we're about 5 minutes away from prop load starting for tonight's launch. You can see that update right there. So, as expected, that is the T-minus 40-minute mark is usually when they give the go for propellant load. We should hopefully start seeing propellant load at the T-minus 35-minute mark. So just about 3.5 minutes from now, that is when they start loading stage 1 with rocket propellant 1, or RP1, refined form of kerosene, along with the liquid oxygen. That's also when they start loading the RP1 on the second stage. However, the LOX is loaded after the RP1, and in between that is the LOX chill down, aka the T-minus 20-minute, 20-second vent that isn't really a vent, but is still the best vent. Whew, all right. But good that we are continuing on towards launch. We will continue answering your questions. Don't forget to tag us at NASA Spaceflight. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. Here's an interesting question, and Max, I'm going to throw this one to you. MG is asking, because you were flying over it and we saw on the barge, do we know why there's a 4-leaf clover painted on the barge?
I'm a little embarrassed to say that I do not know the answer to that. I know that that'll be a question that Julia, our very own Julia Bergeron, would be hopping all over to talk about. But unfortunately, I wish I knew. I really wish I knew, and I would love to find out more about it. I will have to text her tomorrow about it.
If I recall correctly, it had to do with the Falcon 1 originally. They did the 3 flights, they'd essentially run out of funding, but Elon was able to scrounge up enough money to get 1 4th flight in. So they went for the 4-leaf clover because 4th flight and good luck. And since that's basically the launch that saved SpaceX, they kind of kept with the clover as their good luck charm. And you see that typically on all their patches, all of the employee shirts all have them. So if you see the 4-leaf clover in SpaceX, that's why. Here's a good question from Booster 4, and I'm going to pose this to everyone here. They're saying August has slipped away into the moment of time. So how many Falcon 9s have occurred this month? And probably the biggest question for everyone, is SpaceX on track for 148 or at least 120 launches this year? Trevor, I'll start with you.
So I believe this will be the 11th launch of August, and then 9/5 will be the 12th, and that will be all for this month. So as to are they on track for 148? Definitely not. At this point, they've had enough periods of uh, just having to kind of slow down their launch cadence that it's pretty much out of the window. So I'm personally predicting, depending on the model that you use to fit the launch data for this year, between about 126 and 136 launches. So they should definitely get over that 120 launch number. However, the somewhat interesting thing is if you look at all of the launches this year, graph the time between them and plot a like linear trend line, it's actually increasing. So hopefully that trend doesn't continue for the rest of the year and starts decreasing again. But even if you assume a decreasing trend line, you're still not going to surpass about 136 launches this year.
Max, how many do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the data for that pretty much speaks for itself. They obviously are not on track to hit the 148 goal this year. But it's ironically enough, I made a bet with my friend John Kraus at the beginning of the year as to what they would, or as to how many launches they would actually get off the ground this year. And I said around 125. And he said that he was fully confident in the 148 number. And I said, well, okay. So he and I are waiting to see what they actually end up doing at the end of the year. But it so far does not look like it's going in his favor, unfortunately. But time will tell.
Yeah, if I had to put a guess on it, I still think they'll hit 120. I don't see them hitting 140. Maybe 125. Maybe I'm just thinking that because I like the Hubble repair mission, STS 125. But I think it's going to be around the 120 mark. I still think there's, as long as they continue the pace they're at, they're going to pass 100 launches. It's just a matter of how many beyond that. Good question, though. I'm interested to see in chat what people think the number's going to be. I've seen someone else say 135. I've seen 137. So interesting to see. Yeah, the Vegas odds on it.
Yeah, the latter half of this year has certainly been a bit of a struggle so far with what I think it was in June. There was nearly 2 weeks between launches when they had a bunch of weather delays, and then they had the launch that aborted at just after engine ignition. And then obviously the launch failure in July had them stand down for 2 weeks. So it's been a little bit of a rough summer for them, but they're bouncing back quickly, and that's really what matters most.
Exactly. Let's see. Here's a really good question, and that is from Lee. We talk about the ASDS, the autonomous drone ship, but obviously there's got to be some people around. So how are crew protected around drone ships during a stage 1 return? Trevor, I'll throw that one to you.
Sure, yeah. So thankfully, humans are nowhere near the barge during landing. So what they do is they go tug out the drone ship on a tugboat that can either be like on today's mission, it was Signet Warhorse. On some other missions, it's like Bob or Doug themselves. So they tug it out, get everything set up, and then they all go onto either the support ship or the tugboat, and then leave the ASDS in the middle of the ocean, get a few miles away from it, and then they're just a few miles away from the landing. So if something goes wrong, they're totally safe. They're nowhere near it.
Right. And again, you like we were talking about earlier, the crews do come back with it, especially on this one. We saw them out with the non-protective gear, later, thankfully, putting on the protective gear. So they still take precautions as needed. And here's another one from Electric Dawn. I don't know if you know the answer to this one, Trevor, but is it known if B-1062 had the same older landing leg design as B-1058?
I don't think we know. However, it is my understanding that SpaceX does try to do these retrofits to all of their fleet. So my guess would be yes. However, I don't know for sure. That said, uh, even if it had the old landing leg design, the new landing legs wouldn't have prevented this. The only things that SpaceX has publicly commented on about the new landing leg design is that they can self-stabilize after launch. So if there was a hard landing, um, they could, try to make sure that at least all four legs are touching the ground and make the booster a little bit less leany. However, when you have, like I was saying at the start of the stream, right, this landing had about 10 times more energy that those legs had to absorb. And at that point, uh, none of the landing leg upgrades are going to be able to handle that.
Right, I think that was more for balancing than it was for hard impact. I mean, they all still have the crush cores built into them, which are meant to help with these harder landings, and as Max alluded to, we saw those in action on B-1069's first flight, CRS-24, when it came back with quite the lean to it, but obviously that's been repaired, and we see it on the pad right now, and the question is, Max, do we see it frosty yet?
I'm trying to look through the shrubbery right at the bottom of the LOX tank, and I think I want to see I want to say I'm seeing some vapor and some whiteness building on the tank structure, on the outside of the booster, but I'm not sure if that's the case or if my eyes are just playing tricks on me. But I want to say, yeah, I'm almost certain now that I can see frost building on the tank. So I think it's it's almost safe to say that we are definitely in prop load at this point, but we should be based on the timeline.
Yeah, it definitely appears to be frost. It's hard to tell a little bit with the heat haze, but the enhanced zoom that we have there looks like there is some wispy clouds at the bottom of the booster right through those trees as we pass the T-minus 30-minute mark. So we should be 5 minutes in to prop load. And as mentioned right now, the RP-1 is currently being loaded into the second stage while RP-1 and LOX are being loaded in... Or excuse me, RP-1 and LOX being loaded to the first stage while the RP-1 is loaded into the second stage. Which, Trevor, why don't they just load both at the same time on stage 2?
Yeah, this is a very good question, right? We see them doing this on Starship, so a lot of people may wonder why on Falcon is it different? And the reason for this is the second stage really doesn't have that much liquid oxygen, right? You can see how small the tank is and realize that it's tiny. So uh, additionally, right, you want that liquid oxygen to be as cold as possible for launch, since when the liquid oxygen is colder, it is more dense, and because it's more dense, that means you are able to store it more on the vehicle, and your engine runs higher performance, and so you have a bunch of advantages. So therefore, they want to load it as late as possible, so is as little time for it to warm up as possible. So therefore, SpaceX doesn't need to start loading it until T minus 16 minutes. However, the RP-1, on the other hand, right, is much closer to room temperature. It's only about, I think it's like -5, -10 degrees centigrade, somewhere in there. So the rate at which that warms up is much, much slower, right? Exponentially slower. Because of that, SpaceX is fine just letting the RP-1 sit on stage 2 a little bit longer, have that loaded, and then go into the liquid oxygen load procedure.
Yeah, I mean, back when I went to college, I went to class in temperatures that were colder than -5, -10 at times. So, yeah, that's very close to ambient temperature. Although, again, you still see some of that frost in Florida there, given that it's Florida and it's hot and it's humid.
Okay, people are asking me whose room is near -5, and I'm saying I'm comparing order of magnitude, right? Liquid oxygen is like -200 degrees centigrade, and right, room temperature is like 20 centigrade. So -5 centigrade is like basically the same order of magnitude as 20, but -200 is far, far away from that.
Yeah, I mean, back when I was in college in Syracuse, New York, go Orange. I mean, there were temps as cold as -36, -37 Celsius that I went to class in, which is also
Gosh.
about -36, -37 Fahrenheit. It was cold.
Yeah, the point where you don't even have to ask what unit.
Exactly. Yeah, that was chilly. But the meantime, it is getting frosty on the booster as we hit the T-minus 26.5-minute mark. Let's take some more questions here. Here's one from Booster 4. And Max, you've kind of seen a little bit of it, but what's the process after a booster landing on a drone ship?
So after landing on the drone ship, SpaceX has this contraption called the Octograbber, and essentially what that does is it rolls out of a little garage on the drone ships, and what the job of the Octograbber is essentially to grab onto and secure the booster on the deck of the drone ship to ensure or reduce the odds of an incident of the booster falling over, or more importantly, moving across the deck in rough seas. Then, of course, once that's complete, obviously they drag it all the way back over to Port Canaveral or the Port of Long Beach if they launched out of Vandenberg, and then they attach what's called I don't exactly know what it's called. It looks like a hat, and it attaches to the very top of the interstage, and they attach it to a very big crane, and then they essentially just lift it off of the deck of the drone ship after removing it from the octograbber, and they place it on a little, like, I think they use the exact same mounts they use to secure the rocket to the launch pad in order to secure it to the ground over at the port. And from there, they then raise the landing legs individually and then secure them before bringing it back horizontal with a pair of cranes usually, before throwing it on a transporter and bringing it back either over to Hangar X or throwing it on a barge to bring it back up to Vandenberg. So there's a lot more. Of course, that's a heavily oversimplified explanation of what happens. There is so much more that goes on, but we are not exactly privy to a lot of those processes. We can only talk about what we can witness and document with our cameras, say in Port Canaveral, or what we can see in Long Beach. So Falcon 9 is usually turned around, I want to say they average anywhere between like 27 to maybe 33 or 34 days when of course SpaceX is in a groove, and of course they lately unfortunately have not been, based off of what's been happening. But yeah, that should be about it for that.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. And if you want the super in-depth portion of it, there is, again, a video right here on the NSF YouTube channel going over the recovery operations, basically, from landing to port. So you can check that out as well. Here's one from Captain Dram, who's asking, as SpaceX find failures and improve upon them, what do you think the maximum number of flights a booster will be capable of? Trevor, I'll start with you, and then I'll throw it to Max.
Yeah, so I'll give two partial answers to this question. The first is SpaceX is working on certification for these boosters to fly 40 times. And right, given that they seem to be trying to average about 20-ish boosters in the fleets, right, that's a total of 800 launches. Falcon has launched not even 400 times yet, so I suspect they won't need to go above that number with Falcon 9. However, the second part of that question is, what do you define as the booster, right? This is kind of the ship of Theseus question. How much work can they do on it before you say, no, I don't really think that's the same booster anymore? Because, right, this aluminum tanks that they have, right, the lifespan on those, you could, with enough refurbishment and inspections, right, that's more or less an infinite life. So the actual, aluminum tube may be capable of flying, tens of thousands of times or whatever, but obviously with Falcon, they're never going to reach that point. That'll be a question for Super Heavy and Starship way down the line.
Max, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to disagree with you, Trevor, just a little bit, because there are just so many points of failure on Falcon, especially as they get older, even with refurb. It could be anywhere from just in general terms, it could be the grid fins, it could be the welds on the tank structure, it could be the bulkheads inside the tanks. It could be something with the Merlin structurally, or with the Octaweb, or even the landing legs, as we've seen. There's just so much that has to go. I think SpaceX has made it look so easy that we have to keep telling ourselves that this is absolutely so far from routine. I have no words right now, honestly. My brain is fried. There's so much to go wrong, and there are so many moving parts and so many things that have to go right for a launch to be successful, and of course with a landing as well, with the first stage. With all of those points of failure, it's tough to say, because we saw 1058 be the first to pass 18, and then of course it had its unfortunate demise, and then we had 1062 unfortunately have a real failure on landing. So, and we don't exactly know the the cause behind that yet. So it makes it very tough to say. And I want to say Falcon can fly to 40 flights pretty easily. I mean, we were all looking and pretty worried after 15 flights that the boosters were going to pop at any time. But that is a very, very loaded question that it's almost difficult to answer.
I'm going to go with 20 minutes and 20 seconds as we see the T-minus 20 minute 20 second vent happening on screen right there. I will give my answer afterwards. But Trevor, what are we seeing here?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning earlier, the RP1 is loaded before that liquid oxygen. The liquid oxygen load starts at T-minus 16 minutes. So what SpaceX is doing with this T-minus 20 minute and 20-second vent is they're just cooling down and purging that liquid oxygen load line ahead of liquid oxygen load. So they're just making sure that it's not, ambient temperature, so you don't flash any propellants or any of the liquid oxygen, and that, it's all cleaned out. So that's what this vent is for.
And there you go, and that's a good sign. So once we see that vent stop, we will know that liquid oxygen load has begun on the second stage. As for my answer to that question, I think 30 is a good number. I mean, we've seen them get very close. As you mentioned, we've got 1062 that flew for a 23rd time. We have one that is set to be on its 23rd flight if SpaceX goes ahead and continues with that. I think 30 is a safe number. I know we've talked in the past about maybe going in increments of 5 and then breaking down the vehicle, examining it, checking it. If it's good to go, put it right back out for another 5. I think that may be what they do. Anything beyond 30, I'm going to hold my breath every single time it launches. As we continue down, the rocket may be frosty, but how's the weather looking? Max?
It is improving, and that pesky cloud that was hanging over our heads here at the KSC press site earlier, as it has seemed to split apart and break apart, and we are seeing many, many, many more stars in the sky over our heads now, which is lovely, and we love to see it. There's still that breeze coming out, keeping everything nice and cool. Well, as cool as it can be because it's still pretty warm tonight and very sticky. But things seem to be trending in the right direction, as we like to say.
That's what we like to hear. SpaceX earlier mentioning so far weather is good to go. And a reminder for those just joining, this is booster 1069 on the Starlink 8-10 mission with 21 Starlink satellites, including 13 direct-to-cell that will eventually be part of the cellular network through space. And will attempt to land on Just Read the Instructions just hours after receiving clearance from the FAA to continue with launches after the previous landing failure. I see people asking about the booster number. If you hit refresh, you'll see the updated information in the description down below, which gives you all the fun facts you would ever want to know about this mission, too. So, if you're ever in doubt, check it out. Ooh, that rhymed.
You brought up interesting point about the direct-to-cell constellation that ties into something that Elon posted on X the other day. Unfortunately, I don't have the post handy, but I was just reminded of it, that once this direct-to-cell network is operational, which SpaceX has been saying they're expecting that to be at the end of the year, about since the start of the year. So I don't know if they're still on track for that, but hopefully they are. But they're actually going to open up the direct-to-cell network for anyone in case of an emergency. So if you're in the mountains somewhere and you don't have T-Mobile, you're not paying for Starlink service on your phone, you'll still be able to use direct-to-cell in case of an emergency, which is just an awesome decision by the SpaceX team. And especially as a climber who is commonly out in the mountains, it'll be super nice to have that as a backup to, a Garmin, InReach, or any alternative like that.
Yeah, I see some people talking about, well, was it grounded? Was it not grounded? Yes, it technically was grounded. The investigation is still ongoing. However, the FAA determined that it is not a danger to public safety and that as long as they continue to adhere to their launch license, they can continue on. In fact, their exact response to us when we asked here at NSF was the Falcon 9 vehicle may return to flight operations while the overall investigation of the anomaly during the Starlink Group 8-6 mission remains open, provided all other license requirements are met. SpaceX made the return to flight request on August 29th. The FAA gave the approval on August 30th. So, the wording there was a return to flight needed, and this is said return to flight. And also, very good point there with the Starlink Direct to Cell too. Here's a question that we haven't actually asked yet. I see Ninja Guy inquiring about it. Max, what direction is this going?
Sure. So launch tonight is heading up on a 53.16 degree orbital inclination. So in layman's terms, it's heading northeast. So if you are north of Cape Canaveral, say New Smyrna Beach, Daytona, Jacksonville, or even up in the Carolinas or Georgia, you should have a very, very, very nice view of launch tonight as it goes through your sky, pretty much above your head. If you are south of the KSC or Cape Canaveral, not to fret, you will have a very good view of launch still, but because of your location compared to the launch pad, it is going to be a much narrower arch, and it will not take up as much sky space as it normally would. But yeah, it is heading northeast.
There you go. And we talked about just read the instruction. Is the drone ship located downrange? That is, I believe, about 620 kilometers usually for that. And then we have Go Cosmos downrange to help catch the fairings, which is approximately 700 kilometers downrange. And Astro Knucklehead coming in with the support saying, no question, just enjoy Sawyer's commentary. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you enjoy the commentary, because I enjoy doing the commentary, in case you can't tell. Let's see. I see we've already got people asking about it, so we'll address the Starship-sized elephant in the room. What is it looking like since we saw the landing problem here? How are we looking for potential catch of the first stage, or the booster, I guess, technically, Trevor, with Starship?
Yeah, so this landing failure really has absolutely nothing to do with Super Heavy's landing attempt. Super Heavy, right? Our understanding is that next flight they will be going for a catch attempt. It seems like they've filed for those modifications to the launch license with the FAA, and now the FAA is, doing all of their own analysis and working with SpaceX to make sure that they're doing this in a way that is safe to the public. So in terms of timeline, which I assume is the next part of this question, I think we're probably all thinking it's mid to late September at the earliest. SpaceX has said on, I believe, several occasions at this point that they're ready to fly. They're just waiting for regulatory approval. However, they've still been doing a ton of work on the pad. Right, they've had tons of cherry pickers working on the chopsticks and whatnot. So, yeah, we'll have to see.
We will indeed have to see. I'd say it's going to be at least 2 weeks. That's Elon's usual number, right? 2 weeks. And at this point now, we are T-minus 12 minutes away from this Starlink launch here of 8-10. We talked about the recovery of the booster, but Trevor, we don't really talk about the recovery of the fairings. How does that work?
Yeah, so I agree. The fairing recovery program is not discussed as much as it should be. It's an awesome program. So the fairings, there's two on the two fairing halves, which you can see on the vehicle. Right, there's the black inner stage, and then the second stage, and then the vehicle gets a little bit wider. Those are the two fairing halves. And those fairing halves actually have RCS thrusters and parachutes built into them. So what they do is they orient themselves during reentry, and then once they're in the correct orientation and after they've gone through reentry, they deploy a parachute, and then they splash down in the water about 45 minutes after launch. So it takes them a while to come down, just because, right, they don't the mass is very low on them and the surface area is very high, so they have a lot of drag coming into the atmosphere. And then they go up with one of their boats, which on the East Coast they have Bob and Doug, and right now Go Crusader as a temporary one. And then on the West Coast they have Go Cosmos, and they just scoop them out of the water more or less. And then into the boat, onto some fairing holding devices, and then they take them back to land where they begin refurbishment on them. And I believe at this point we know that fairings have flown for 20 times at this point. So it's very exciting, and I agree. SpaceX should talk about the program more.
Yeah, and just want to mention, you flip flop to the ships. Go Cosmos is the one that is here on the East Coast, and in fact, that's the one that is downrange tonight, hopefully to recover these fairing halves. And I've seen some confusion in the chat of, booster and timing. There are 2 SpaceX launches tonight. You right now are watching the first one, Group 8-10 from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The second one is Starlink Group 9-5. That one is out of Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. That is scheduled to launch an hour and 5 minutes after this launch. So 4:48 a.m. Eastern, 1:48 a.m. local time there. That is a different booster. That one is booster 1081. This one here tonight is 1069 in Florida. That one will be landing on the drone ship. Of course, I Still Love You. And this one will be landing on Just Read the Instructions. So I know there's a bit of confusion with that, but we got back-to-back Starlink return to flights here.
Yeah, and that Vandy mission will be the 100th landing attempt on, of course, I Still Love You, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Personally, one of my favorite barges, I gotta say. I have a personal connection to it, and it's the first one I saw. I still love the name. My family still loves the name. Of course, I Still Lie Here towel is in my possession as well, so. I do want to. Oh, go ahead.
It'll be the 93rd successful landing on Just Read the, or on, of course, I Still Love You. It has had, based on my count, I believe 7 landing failures. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, a shortfall of Gravitas had the perfect record of the fleet, and now it is, I believe, 81 for 82. And Just Read the Instructions out there tonight. Do want to thank some support here. Erwin Van Til, thank you for becoming a Pad Rat member. And Mats, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Tip my hats to Mats here for that. So thank you very much. And again, all that support, greatly appreciated from everyone, especially at this ungodly hour in the middle of the night here, 3:35 a.m. currently Eastern Time. Thank you. It allows us to keep going, have all these camera views out there, have people out there for the launches, and bring you, say, drone and helicopter footage of booster parts returning on a barge. So thank you. All right. Let's see here. We are now at the T-minus 7-minute mark, and we may not be chilling right now, but Max, I'm sure the engines are chilling. Why is that?
So the last thing you want to do is flow cryogenic fluids or fuels through plumbing that is certainly not at the temperature that the fuel is at, because that will cause a load of thermal shocking, flash steaming from the propellant meeting the surface of the not so cold plumbing, and that will cause a whole range of issues from the plumbing cracking, and there's a whole bunch of other nasty things happening. So what you want to do is flow just a tiny amount of that propellant at a time through all of that plumbing in the engine section to make sure that all of that plumbing and everything else, the pumps, the plumbing, and everything else are down to their proper operating temperatures to ensure a smooth startup and of course smooth operation of the engines. So that should be happening here right now, if not very shortly.
That is what we are hoping. And I do see the comments in chat. Yes, I am aware there's a lot of people viewing tonight from overseas, especially people where it's 9:35 in the morning, 8:35 over in the UK and Europe. We've got about what was that, 5 in the afternoon or so over in Australia. So, yeah. But your team tonight, 2 of us here, Max and myself, are based on the East Coast, and Trevor is in Mountain Time, so it's still quite early for us. But at this point, it is not quite so early for the launch countdown to continue on here as we come up on the T-minus 5-minute mark. Things are about to get exciting, starting with the strong back retract. Trevor, how does that go?
Yeah, so coming up, the strong back will retract by 1.8 degrees, which may not sound like much, and it's not. This is just preparing for it to throw back during launch. So after the vehicle has lifted off, it will then fall back an additional, it goes past 45 degrees, so it's substantial. And the reason why SpaceX does all of this is they just want that strong back to be as far away from the vehicle as possible. And having it far away just means that the flamey bit of the rocket is far further from the strong back, and that means less refurbishment is needed.
Speaking of being far away from it, Max, I know you're still only a couple miles away, so I'm going to let you get set up and get ready to capture fantastic views, and we'll catch you after. Coming up now on the T-minus 4-minute mark here. We've got a bunch of fuel loads that should be wrapping up. Trevor, can you kind of run us through the rest of the timeline here?
Yeah, of course. So, as you mentioned, SpaceX will be wrapping up fuel load on all stages. So, RP1, right, is concluded on second stage and will be concluded here shortly on stage 1. And then liquid oxygen load on both stages will be wrapped up by about T-minus 2 minutes. From this point going forward, the next big event will be at T-minus 60 seconds in an event known as startup, which is when the vehicle it takes over control of the countdown. So right now it's all on ground-based computers, and then that's when the signal and everything is handed over to the vehicle in preparation for launch. Also at T-minus 60 seconds, the tanks on the vehicle will begin pressurization to flight pressure, which right, you want them to be at high pressure during launch so that they're structurally sound. Following that, about 15 seconds later at T-minus 45 seconds, the launch director will give their go for launch. And this is just the final go. And when we hear that, we know that systems are looking pretty good. This will continue up until T-minus 10 seconds. At T-minus 10 seconds, the ground operators can no longer call an abort of the vehicle. It is
Stage
all
1 lock
automatic
load
from
complete.
now on out. And there we have confirmation stage 1 lock load is complete. And then engine ignition will start at T-minus 2.7 seconds.
There we go. And you hear the call out, stage 1 LOX load complete, liquid oxygen fully loaded there into the first stage. And we should be hearing the call out on the second stage coming up in about 30 seconds or so from now on that being fully loaded. And once that's done, Falcon 9 will be completely loaded with all of its propellants ahead of tonight's launch. And as we hit the T-minus 2-minute mark, so far, everything appears to be looking good. For those just joining, as we hit that 2-minute mark, this is Starlink 8-10 from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, Space Launch Complex 40, where Falcon 9 is returning to flight after a booster
Stage
landing
2 LOX
in
load complete.
failure. And now Stage 2 LOX load complete, the vehicle completely fueled. This booster, B-1069, will be the return to flight here, and it is scheduled to land on Just Read the Instructions, about 620 kilometers downrange, while it delivers these 21 Starlink satellites, including some direct-to-cell.
Gas line
That vent,
closeouts
the
have started.
That gas line closeout is that vent that you see there. Trevor, that's purging the line, right?
Yep, just trying to get them all clear ahead of engine ignition here coming up in just about a minute.
Yeah, you don't want any gaseous oxygen hanging around right near engine ignition. All right, we are under T-minus 1 minute. At this point, we should be waiting for the call out. Falcon 9 is in startup. And there it is. As you mentioned, Trevor, the onboard computer's now taking over. Also, the tanks are being pressurized to flight levels. As we hit T-minus 45 seconds, we're going to hope to hear go for launch from the launch director.
Go for launch.
There it is. Everything is go for launch. Next thing to keep an eye out for will be the flash of the T-tab and the ignition of the 9 Merlin 1D engines underneath Falcon 9 at T-minus 3 seconds, followed 3 seconds later by liftoff. And once it lifts off, the sound will take a little bit of time to get to our mics, but we will be quiet and let you enjoy the beautiful rumble that is Falcon 9 in about T-minus 10 seconds as it lifts off. About 5 seconds now. Keep an eye out for engine ignition. There it is. And liftoff. Falcon 9 returning to flight once again. B-1069 takes to the skies. Go Internet satellites.
Wow, that was quite some launch audio. So you're maybe talking while muted, but we have had a successful liftoff of Starlink
Yes.
Group 8-10, the return to flight of Falcon 9, after
Yes.
just over 48 hours.
We gotta love the VAB squeal. That was fantastic to hear. Super clear on a night like tonight. And as we hit T+2 minutes, we're coming up on 3 events in rapid succession. MECO, main engine cutoff, when the 9 Merlin 1D engines shut down, followed by stage separation, and then that will be followed shortly thereafter by SES1, second engine start 1, as the Merlin vacuum engine fires up. And then about 20 seconds after that, we should expect payload fairing separation. So a bunch of stuff to look out for back to back. We should be coming up on MECO. There we go. Looks like we have MECO. We have stage separation. And ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. There we go. 21 Starlink satellites heading to their orbit. And now, booster B-1069 heading to the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Hoping to make the first successful landing in a row, restarting SpaceX's landing streak. And payload fairing separation happening right there on your screen as well. Everything looking good so far. It's always cool to see those Starlink satellites stacked like that, Trevor. I don't think we talk about it that much usually, about how they're stacked and how they're separated.
Yeah, it's a very, very clever mechanism, and it's obvious they designed the satellite around the launch vehicle, which is pretty cool. And then they're doing the same with the full-size Starlink V2 and Starship, so certainly a unique deployment mechanism.
Exactly. Now you'll see on the bottom left the speed slowing down, the altitude going up. It should be nearing apogee, the highest point in its current trajectory here. And at that point, you will see the speed basically stop, the altitude stop, and then it will pick up speed again as it works its way downward. That usually happens right about 119 kilometers. And there is that 119 kilometer mark. And then we'll see the speed pick up and the booster come down. Obviously, a lot of eyes tonight on that first stage, hopefully landing back on the drone ship. And there we go. Speed completely stagnant. That's apogee. Now it'll be picking up and working its way down. So we have 2 engine burns. We've got the entry burn and the landing burn. That entry burn coming up in about a minute and a half from now or so. Can you kind of talk about the importance of the entry burn, Trevor, and how it works?
Yeah, of course. So Falcon 9 uses a 3-engine landing burn most of the time, and on all of these Starlink missions. So what that means is it's in a 1-3-1 configuration where it'll start by igniting its center E9 engine before a couple of seconds later igniting the 2 side engines. So this will be obvious because you'll see the flame around the vehicle. It'll first be kind of all in a circle, and then you'll see it kind of go to a line when those 2 side engines ignite. And then those 2 side engines remain lit for the vast majority of the burn before shutting down just before the center engine. And what this burn does is it just helps bleed off a lot of that velocity from falling back down, which reduces the reentry heating. Because keep in mind, peak reentry heating is roughly proportional to the cube of your velocity. So if you even just decrease your velocity by 30%, then your amount of heat is whatever, like 0.7 cubed is. Like your peak heating is about a third. So this just makes it much better for reusing the vehicle, and that's why they have the entry burn on Falcon 9. So yeah.
And there's your Trevor math for the day. Standing by for that entry burn. And there we go. Entry burn has started. This usually lasts for approximately 20 seconds as it fights fire with fire to work its way down to the drone ship.
Yeah, so
you could
I have seen some people in chat wondering why Falcon 9 or why Super Heavy doesn't need an entry burn. And the reason is the burn of Super Heavy is done in kind of a more efficient way where the booster velocity is actually a decent amount lower at stage separation. So therefore, Super Heavy is actually going slower through reentry than Falcon 9 is after its reentry burn. So because of that, they just don't end up needing that entry burn.
There we go. You can see the effects coming off there through those grid fins as we pass lower than 13 kilometers now towards the deck of the drone ship. You can see stage 2 also continuing its burn on the right side there. No, it is not a stubby nuzzle, chat. It is the full size. All right, 8 kilometers up. We should hopefully see that landing burn starting in a couple seconds here. And hopefully we get a successful landing. I'll just read the instructions. I know that everyone in chat is probably holding their breath right now. Under 1,000 kilometers to go. Or under 1,000 kilometers an
I
hour.
was going to say, I hope under 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah. 2 kilometers, in fact, now. So stand by for that engine burn. There it is. There is the landing burn. See those grid fins doing their steering? Waiting for the landing legs to deploy. Landing leg deploy. And
There
bingo,
we go.
right in the center. This time we can actually say it as SpaceX successfully lands booster 1069, bringing their landing streak up to 1 and counting.
And that was the 342nd booster landing.
Yeah, I should have said yes, 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 instead of no, 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 no. And there is SECO 1, shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine. That will complete one more burn that's a couple seconds long prior to the deployment of those Starlink satellites into their initial orbit. But just based off of the initial telemetry, looks like a good parking orbit there. Max, how was that launch for you?
My goodness. Well, so we use Starlink for a chunk of our communications here, and like right at around T minus 2 minutes, it appears we had some kind of satellite handover, and I lost comms with you guys briefly. So I apologize if that caused any issues with anybody else. Um, but launch was good, apart from the fact that another cloud decided to form up right above our heads and obstructed a large amount of our view for launch, unfortunately. So we still saw it. We saw it, of course, leave the pad and then go right behind the cloud, and we saw it poke through a couple of times. But the audio was absolutely crisp and clear and clean, just like you like to hear. The VAB was making all sorts of noises like it normally does. Um, and then we saw it poke out right before main engine cut off for the booster, and then of course we saw SES1, and we were able to look at it with our own eyes almost all the way to the horizon, almost. But I could not get the camera on, unfortunately. So a bit of mixed results here tonight, but it's all pretty much out of our control, and we did the best we could.
But the sound was absolutely fantastic. And yes, the VAB squeal was quite apparent tonight. It really made itself known. For those who don't know, the VAB squeal, that kind of screeching noise that you heard during ascent, is actually a result of the panels on the vehicle assembly building resonating at a frequency very similar to those of those Merlin 1D engines. And because it's a straight shot essentially from pad 40 to the vehicle assembly building side panels, you get that beautiful squealing sound. You don't get it as much from 39A. The only other place that you do get it is the landing zones, LZ1 and 2 will give a little squeal as well. We will have a couple of replays coming up, so hang tight for those. We will do a couple of quick ones here. So let's start it off. Carson, let's take a look back at the return to flight. Here we go. We'll start with this one from one of our remote cameras there at the Kennedy Space Center. Gotta love when it lights up the sky like that. This the wide angle from Max's camera. It's so hard to describe in person what it's like for a night launch, seeing it turn night into day. And I mean, I think this is as close as you can get seeing something like that wide shot there of how it really, really changes night to day. Am I trying to describe that well, Max?
Absolutely. I think it's best described as an artificial or man-made sunrise. It is absolutely stunning, and that's why Carolog's engines, I think, are some of the most brilliant to watch and look at night, apart from, of course, solid rocket boosters, just because of how well... Ooh, we got audio coming in.
Oh, yeah. Listen for that VAB squeal. There it is. Gotta love it. Absolutely gotta love that audio. And also gotta love all the people that have been joining us and watching and hanging out and chat with us. And as well as people that have been giving us some support. Janice, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And Go Flyers saying, what an awesome time to be a fan of the space industry. Y'all are the best. Hashtag send it. Hashtag fluffhead. Thank you very much for that. It is, I think that's perfectly put, is what a time to be a fan of the space industry. And I'm so honored to be a part of a team that has such amazing fans here, including my co-commentators for the evening. Max, thank you for joining us from out in the field.
It is an absolute pleasure as always, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to hang out with us on this not so bright but very early morning here at the KSC and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And we will hopefully see you again very soon.
It's true. This wasn't your ordinary Starlink, and they do be hitting different. Thank you so much for joining us, Trevor.
Yes, of course. And just as a reminder, this is not SpaceX's only launch of tonight. In just over an hour, they will have another. And if that launch time holds, this will be the shortest amount of time between any two SpaceX launches ever. So
About an hour, 5 minutes. That's super quick, yes.
Yeah, previous
And
record was 1 hour and 51 minutes.
let's keep our fingers crossed for that. And thank you as well to Carson for operating the stream tonight, pushing buttons, pulling levers, and all the fantastic views. And a quick thank you as well to the fantastic Bideford for the $25 super chat, saying wonderful launch, fantastic landing, great hosts. Well, thank you so much for that, Bideford. We always appreciate your support. And we appreciate you watching as well. So we will see you all for the next launch. Have a great night, or morning, or day, everybody.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting down to SE off. Bring in SE off. Off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Look at this!
Put that in the big bag.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.